Well, it's great to be here again in Portugal. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for asking me. My story will be about the times where we live in, because we live in a time of answers and not in a time of questions anymore. You see it in society. We fight against my answer is better than your answer. We oppose each other instead of cooperating each other. And I think also from a smart city perspective, it's not about answers, but it's about questions. But finding the right questions is much more difficult than finding the right answers. Is anyone familiar with the number 42? What? Yeah, the answer to everything. It's a book of Douglas Adams in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's a problem with Earth because one planet wants to connect with another planet, and the Earth is in between, so it needs to get, it needs to be gone, it needs to be destroyed. And you've got one survivor, but in this book there you have a supercomputer, and this supercomputer has been computing and computing for 7.5 million years, and then he comes up with the answer 42. The problem is that humans have forgotten what the question was, so they had this supercomputer calculating for 7.5 million years the answer to everything, but they forgot the question. And I think that correlates with the society we live in. We have a lot of answers to building up cities, to building up structures, to work in a certain way, but we don't know what these answers, what the original questions were. And if we go back 2,000 years, the Romans made major and big decisions. If they needed to make a big decision, they went to the wise men, called the augurs. They had this thing they called the leaders, so you could see, spot them and know them. And if Caesar or August needed to make an important decision, he went to this group of men, the augurs, and what they did, they cut open chickens, looked into the chickens, looked to the flights of birds, and then they said, well, based on the intentions of the chicken and the birds, this is what you need to do, and they listened to it. In our case, I think if in our current society a director or a prime minister or maybe a sporting coach would make a decision based on cutting open chickens and made a decision, I think that would be very destroying. It would be the end of your career probably. But then we took it really serious, and all the big decisions were made by the advice of these augurs. If you go back 1,000 years, the church was very important. Churches are still important in a lot of countries, but all the decisions were being made or being challenged by the Catholic Church. And all decisions we made were based on the information, the way they thought, and they give an answer, and big change in societies always went to this wise man of people in the Catholic Church. In these days we don't do that often anymore, but is anyone familiar with this guy? Not all of you together. It's Adam Smith, and he published his book Wealth of Nations in 1976. And in this book, the prime assumption was that self-interest of human beings is a really good thing. So if everybody would act upon their self-interest, society would upgrade. In his book he said, well, there will be a big difference between the poor and the rich in the country, but that doesn't mind, he said, because the poor will be less poor based on this self-interest, because we will have competition, and it's the start of the idea, the broad idea of capitalism. But this in his book in 1776. And before he published his book, we didn't think in growth. We only thought in having a good life, of leading the life as we need. But in his book, self-interest is good, so greed is good. If we compete with each other, it will upgrade society. And this is what we believe in now. This is our religion. Everything we think needs to be this hockey stick, like we call it in the Netherlands. It's about growth. I invest a bit and then we need growth. We don't know why we need growth. We don't know what the original question is, but we just need growth. And we have this answer to everything. Everything needs to grow. Also, me as an entrepreneur, I always get the question, with how many people do you want to end up in 2 or 3 years? How does your turnover need to grow? I always said, I don't want to grow. I want to grow in intelligence, in getting more and more different questions. I don't need to grow as a company. Then people look at me, are you crazy? Or why don't you want to grow? Well, you can grow growth can also be in other ways than just the growth of money and thinking in return on investment. But we live in a society in which return on investment is the answer to everything. We don't know the original question anymore, but we think growth for growth's sake, that's what we need, that's the answer to everything. But we forgot what the original question was. It's not about having a more pleasant life, taking care of children, or making sure that next generation is going to grow up in a beautiful world. No, it's the answer to everything is growth. From a commercial point of view, so from a company point of view, but also from a government point of view, if we invest as a government or if we invest in cities, the outcome needs to be more than what we invest in. Otherwise, we say it's not a wise investment. And that's interesting to see that. So we live in this time of answers. The big answer to everything is return on investment or growing our economy. Everything needs to grow, but we forgot the original question. And if you do an experiment in biology, you put in bacteria in this Petri cup, you put in bacteria and you close it, you heat it up, bacteria will grow every 20 minutes. It will double, so the growth is exponential. And in the beginning, in a few hours, well, they grow, and they can take some part on this in this place where they are in. But when the population becomes too high, they don't know what to do with all the garbage they have, because they need to grow, they need to eat too, and the increments of these bacteria, they need to place it somewhere. And then the colony, when it first grows very exponentially, it starts to diminish in very fast. And in the end, the colony is exactly the same as in the beginning, but life is not that fun anymore, because it's the gases, the way of life is really bad for these bacteria in this Petri cup. If you compare this to Earth, that's maybe the same thing what happens if we keep growing and thinking and growing for growth's sake. So this is a hard one, but Edward Abbey, a famous US biologist, said growth for growth's sake is the ideology of the cancer cell. It will destroy you. It will maybe destroy society. It can destroy a lot of things, and we don't think about it because we've got this answer to everything, that's growth. So we are addicted to this one-dimensional currency. It's called the euro, the dollar, or the yen, or whatever, but it's a one-dimensional currency, and we are really addicted to it. We don't know. And I think if someone is going to give a presentation within 1,000 years from now on this stage, or the stage will probably be different, but on this part of Earth, they will think maybe there will be a story about the Romans that they made strange decisions, or 1,000 years they made. For them, 2,000 years we made decisions based on just belief. And they said, well, 1,000 years ago, they just made decisions based on growth and return on investment. But we are really addicted to it. And they will think, those people were crazy. Well, we don't think we are crazy. We think we are smart. That's why we have this event about smart cities. The question is, what kind of questions are we going to ask to ourselves to come up with different perspectives? And our dominant logic of growth makes us act as today's rulers, not as the developers of tomorrow. So in making decisions, we think about what will be the outcome now or in the upcoming 5 or 10 years, not about what's the impact on the next generations in 20, 30 years from now, or maybe 50 years from now. And I think that's we need to. So we need to find new questions. Nobody would want to live in a city like this probably, but this is how we design cities. If you put in cars over here, and this way you can cross the street, that's exactly the same. If you think most cities, the cars are really dominant. We don't know why, but they are dominant because we need to go from A to B as fast as possible, because that adds to return on investment. So we need to be as efficient as we are. Cities are being built around being efficient. As much efficiency, much more efficiency is needed than needed. And I don't think life is about efficiency. I don't know, might I become 80 that I look back upon my life as having led the most efficient life ever. I think I did quite some things wrong. But cities are based on this prominent idea of this dominant logic of we need to have more efficiency, because if we have more efficiency, people can get from A to B much faster. So this is the way we design cities. It's not good for life, but it's good for our efficiency. And we have this short cycle we are caught in now. We plan everything. We think if we make plans, well, we can control where society is going, but it's not, because a lot of things happen we cannot control. Think about COVID 3.5 years ago. Nobody was prepared for it, but it happens. And it will always happen. Chaos will always happen. But we think if we plan and plan and plan, we have control of the outcome of where we are going, but it's not. But the more we plan, if you look really good into plans, I normally don't see plans with questions in it. In plans are always answers. This is the answer. This is what we're going to do there. 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 And in no plans, I don't spot that much plans that are answers. Governments make annual planning, big business, big companies make annual planning. It's about this is the money we invest in marketing, this is what we put in production, this is what we put in logistics. Nobody knows what the original question was, but we give answers in these plans. And we don't think enough about the answers we give. And I think from a smart city perspective, but also from a commercial perspective, this is Alfred Russel Wallace, who came up with the idea of the theory of evolution. He was earlier than Darwin, and he wrote in a letter to Darwin this phrase: "In all works on natural history, we constantly find details of the marvelous adaptation of animals to their food, their habits, and the localities in which they are." Darwin was scared by this letter. He thought, oh my God, I've been working on this for all my life, and he published his book earlier than Wallace, so we remember Darwin, but in fact Wallace had the original idea. And if you think about this, this is the same for cities or organizations or us humans. If you erase animals and put over here in governments or put in companies, it's the same. We constantly need to adapt. And we enter a new phase in society. I don't think IT is dominant anymore, or that knowledge is dominant anymore. It's about intelligence that will be dominant in the way we need to build up our society. So it's not about knowledge anymore. ChatGPT has a lot of knowledge, and it's about asking the wise questions or being creative in your questions. Then you get new, different kind of knowledge, and you can base your future upon it. But this is really important, the ability to adapt. And that's difficult, because in our plans and in our way of thinking, we think about now and the big structure over here. We don't think about the outliers. So we think in an average. Everything we think about the average client, or the average owner, or the average man or women. We think about average. And averages, in my opinion, are very problematic, because with my left foot I can be in 10 degree of water, with my right foot is 75 degrees. On average I will be fine, but both my legs will die. So you need to think in the outliers. And we don't, but the outliers of now might be the future in 10, 20, 30 years from now. But all plans are based on this. We don't ask questions in our plans, so we don't have a clue what the future will look like, because we don't study the outliers. I teached the university in Eindhoven, Technological University, and I once had a big discussion with his professors. He said, if I study data, I always get rid of the outliers out of the data because they mess up my data. I think, well, that's an interesting assumption, but then the only thing you're going to think about is today. You skip out the outliers, so you miss the clues to the future. But it's difficult, because discovery starts with embracing the confusion of not knowing. And as a director or a sport coach or a politician or whatever, you're not paid for being insecure. You're paid to be secure and to have all the answers. Maybe you don't, but yeah, it's your job to have answers and not have questions. So it's difficult to say, I don't know. I don't know what the future is going to look like. That's difficult. It's difficult from a mentality point of view. It's difficult from a human point of view, because if you say, I don't know, you're actually saying, I'm insecure. But this is the most important question we ask in life, why? And most companies get crazy if people ask a lot of times the question why. Will probably be bad for your career. You can all do a social experiment in the upcoming months and constantly ask the question why to your colleagues, to your friends or whatever, probably you will end up in complete solitude within 4 weeks because people don't like you anymore. They think, oh, stop asking questions. We need to go on this plan. Don't ask questions. It's a good plan. We made a good plan. So asking the question why is not always helping you. I asked the question why a lot of times when I studied, and not all teachers like me, just because I asked the question why. I just wanted to understand or didn't see the logic. So they dislike me sometimes for asking this question all the time. But why is very important. I think questions pave new ways to the future and answers pretend to have found the right way. If you are more open into asking questions and finding the right questions, you will open up new possibilities. You will open up more possibilities for mobility or for housing or whatever the problem is you want to challenge. But you need to ask these questions. But like I started with, we firmly believe in this answer that everything needs to grow. So it's no use of asking questions. We just need to grow. We need to do stuff. But questions pave new ways to the future. And this is Plato, from Greece, of course. And he wrote down in his book, The State and the Theaters, he said, the only people capable of ruling a country in a great way are philosophers, because they don't have an opinion, they just ask questions. By asking questions, they open up new perspectives. And be neutral in your questions, really be neutral. If you are not neutral, you're in fact asking questions so that people come up with that answer. But if you are neutral in your way of questioning, that's a big advantage for thinking about the future. And I think if you have answers, you possess knowledge. And if you ask the right questions, well, you are intelligent. And we enter this age that's about intelligence and not about knowledge anymore. AI has all the knowledge. ChatGPT, that's just a lousy first version, but it will be in 5 years or 10 years from now, will be much stronger. There is a lot of knowledge. So it's not about knowledge anymore. It's about asking the right questions to all the systems that will be around us within 5 or 10 years. It's about finding these questions, and that's much more difficult than raising or having answers. And therefore I came up with the concept of return on learning. Instead of thinking a return on investment, we as a company, and my new book that will be published in 1 week from now, it's called Return on Learning. I think next to return on investment, we also need return on learning. And we need two steering ways of thinking. One is, okay, I invest money, and what will be the outcome of the money? And the second of it, well, if I do stuff with the money, what do we learn? And I had this call of a big internet shop in the Netherlands. They said, we invested a lot of money in a new project. They invested around 1.5 million euros. They said, we stopped this project. I said, why? Well, the outcome, the business model didn't work. I said, so the return on investment is 0. What is the return on learning? They didn't understand me, so I needed to explain it to them at first. I said, what did you log? What did you learn in the 40 months of this learning expedition? Because if you try something new, it's more a learning expedition instead of making sure that there will be an outcome. That's the plan. But you have learned a lot in these 40 months. What did you log? They said, we log. They had 2 lousy PowerPoint presentations on a Google Doc drive, so nobody looked on it anymore. Said, you invested 1.4 million euros, you did 40 months of exploring, and you don't know what you learned? Then it's a waste of money, because you could have learned a lot. What were the assumptions? Which people did you speak with? What were the insights? What did you gain in intelligence? You could have built a lot of intelligence in your company, but you didn't log it. And you need to think in terms of logging. There are things that are going to happen to your business model or to cities or whatever you're busy with. The dinosaurs didn't plan this happening, so they were destroyed. But I hope we are more intelligent than dinosaurs. So if we plan, we think we have an answer. But if we think about what will be the impact that will happen in this earth in 10, 20, 30 years from now, or happening to our city, we can come up with different perspectives. And return on learning focuses on achieving high learning curves. So it's not about the outcome, it's about the expedition in between. And you need to log as much as possible as you can. This is a famous Portuguese, so I thought about a famous Portuguese, Magalhães. He sailed around the world. Well, in fact, he did not, because he was killed in the Philippines, but that's, it's still called the Travel of Magellan, but he was killed. But Pigafetta, one of the people working on this, he wrote a brilliant journal. It's one of my favorite books, because you can go back in time 500 years, read the book, and you travel with him. This is a decision, oh, did we travel? This was a problem on that island, we couldn't find fresh water or whatever, so we decided it. You can follow his whole journey 500 years later. And when we do innovation projects, when we do business development projects, try to experiment within cities, we don't log anything. There's no Pigafetta on the expedition we are doing in these times. 500 years ago, they logged everything, and you can still relive that journey. And when we do experiments and innovation, nothing is logged, everything is lost. And I think that's what we need to relearn. We need to learn from people like Magalhães. We can learn a lot from him, because they log everything. So 500 years later, you can still learn what the lessons he learned. So I think within organizations, it's not about accountants. Of course, you need accountants, but they record the past. Accountants are recording the history. This is what we invested, this is what we did up till now. They cannot say anything about the future. So we need reporters within organizations, people who log everything, all the learnings, because the more you learn, the more you gain new insights and the more questions you can raise. And our capacity to adapt is crucial in the times in which we live. If you cannot adapt, you will die. Well, that's not a problem from a macro point of view, but it's a problem from an individual point of view. But you need to adapt. And the power to adapt is becoming more and more important, because things are changing on this world in such a quick way that if you cannot adapt, you will be left behind. But you can only adapt if you have an intelligent system. I really believe if you work with return on learning and think about the learning curve, think about what you learn and all the questions you raised, you will build an intelligent system. And the more you learn about what the possible future might look like, the more it will be easier for you to adapt, because you are already into this phase, instead of what's happening like the dinosaurs did. They were looking at the sky, oh, there are things coming our way, meteors. That was the end of them. And I think a lot of companies or governments are still acting like those dinosaurs. What's happening? AI, what's happening? What's happening? But you need to build this intelligent system to really build this power to adapt, because that's crucial in the times in which we live in. But it's difficult, because we have a fixed way of thinking. This is the answer we have in society. We know we need new perspectives, but then we come into this dilemma zone. And we fight battles often in the dilemma zone. We as a company, together with our clients, we fight battles in this dilemma zone, because, hey, we know what we got, we know what we have, we know what we want, and this is about the future. Well, what do we invest in? Do I put €1 in here, then I know what the outcome is? Or do I put money in here? We still make SWOT analysis, and I think SWOT stands for simply waste of time, but we spend a lot of money in it. Because SWOT analysis is about this. It's not about the future. It's about the current system. It's about the current index, and that's of no use. We need to think. We enter this dilemma zone, and this will be much quicker, because the new technology, the new things are already there. So maybe we have 2 or 3 dilemma zones. And when you're thinking about the future and driving experiments about the future state of cities, it's constantly thinking we are in this dilemma zone. We have a fixed way of thinking, that's good for now. We need a new way, but how to jump from one to the other. And I think most of you have seen the movie, it's my assumption, Back to the Future. Maybe you've seen it several times, and when Marty McFly flew 30 years in the future, came back, and you understood what the future would look like. Think about it, if we could travel now with all of us in this room for just 1 week to 2033, walk around in the cities, see the technology, see what society is, come back in this room, we would have a clear vision of where we wanted to go, or which problems would be arise, and which problem we need to challenge, and which problems we need to cope, which things we can gain a lot of, which new technology will there and help us. If we could travel 10 years up front and go back, well, we would have learned so much, and we would have seen the future that we probably would sit here completely different. And that's, of course, not possible. But you've got this backcasting process you can use within return on learning. It's about thinking about the future. How will the world look like? We as a company are now working for a big company in California, Driscoll's. They are a world market leader in fruit. We say, based on trends and a lot of research, we said, well, the world will look like this in 10 years from now from a food perspective. We made sure that we really felt it with each other, studied a lot of new movies, studied the outliers instead of the hidden, we studied a lot of outliers, then came back with a team of 25 people and said, if this is the way we think the future will look like, what will that mean for our strategy? What will that mean for our innovation process? Which experiments are we going to drive? This backcasting process helps you a lot within this, implementing this return on learning. And yesterday's home runs don't win today's games. And the question to me is, are you still playing by the same rules like you thought, well, this is the way we played yesterday and we won, we still survive as a company, government, smart city is for everyone. Do you still play the game in the same way today, or do you think, well, we can also play it next year, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, we will still have the same people, we will still have the same organization, we will still use the same technology? Well, then you're still playing yesterday's home runs, but then you're sure you don't win today's games, and you definitely won't win the game of tomorrow. So, return on investment takes care of now, and return on learning secures the future. And my story is not about return on investment because it's the only thing we have now. It's about steering on it because you cannot go out of budget and you need to think in this way of return on investment. But my analysis is that we don't have a steering instrument next to return on investment that secures the future. So we only have this one instrument, growth, 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 money, 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 and that's what we have. But we need a new instrument next to it, and that for me is return on learning. And think about being Pigafetti, thinking about logging everything, think about what we learned, build this intelligent system. The more intelligent you will become, you will see more options, and your ability to adapt will be higher and higher and higher. This is one of my big heroes, and he once said, it's not about what you know, it's about what you're willing to learn. And I think we don't ask these questions within governments, within cities often. It's not about what we will want to learn. It's about the answers we gain, the answers we have, and the way we plan it and follow these plans. But it's about what are we willing to learn. To me, that's a more important question than what we already know. Because like I said, knowledge is not that important anymore. AI will have a lot of knowledge. We need to ask the right questions. And I think without a question, the wonder, the future remains closed. So I don't hope if you do this social experiment in the upcoming month and ask the question why all the time, maybe there are 2, 3 people starting to love you even more, and they will be asking this question why. But kids ask the question all the time, why? As a parent, you get crazy of it. Because I say so, that's a lousy argument, of course. Because I say so, then you're acting like a CEO. To your kids, because I say so, but they challenge you. And we need to have more kids' way of thinking to make sure that we will have a beautiful future on this earth. And therefore, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the experts are few. So be aware of experts. Experts might in fact be the biggest barrier to the future because they have become an expert based on data of the past. They don't know, understand, and they have this really dominant way of thinking. This is my knowledge, I've gained this knowledge, so I'm this big expert, but the expert might be the biggest barrier to the future. So make sure that you are, and a lot of people around you with a beginner's mindset. I never understand when a company is looking for new people that they say you need to have at least 10 years experiment in the sector. I think, no, don't have any experience, because then you raise different kind of questions. And high learning curves and their application are the crucial currency for the future. So we had this one-dimensional currency, that's the euro, the yen, the dollar, whatever we were thinking. We need a new currency beside that, and for me, those are the high learning curves and the application of them. So be big and fatty, make sure you think about the future. For me, return on investment is material profit, and return on learning is intangible profit. And if you don't think in this intangible profit, well, maybe we become a dinosaur, and I don't want to be a dinosaur. I don't know if you want to be a dinosaur, but I don't want to be a dinosaur. So I end up with this small movie.
If the past is your only guide, you won't discover anything new. So we challenge you to open your mind, to start your expedition into the unknown.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You may be scared and feel insecure. You will experience setbacks and make mistakes.
If you're not prepared to be wrong, you will never come up with anything original.
So find out, dare to fail, explore, and discover. The future starts with not knowing. Embrace it.
So I'm hoping you will change your position from standing still to jumping. Thanks.